In India, there is a temple that was not built upward. It was carved downward, straight into the side of a mountain. A single mass of basalt, cut from the top, hollowed inward, shaped into halls, courtyards, towers, and gods. When it was finished, some estimates suggest that more than 200,000 tons of rock had been removed. With the tools of the period, with almost no margin for error, and it is only one of 5 places in India where the past stops behaving like a finished story. A temple carved out of a single mountain. A frozen lake holding human remains from different centuries. A capital once among the great cities of its time, now scattered across a horizon of boulders. A desert city already organized when most of what we call ancient history had not yet begun. And a temple vault whose main chamber has not been publicly inventoried and whose opening remains bound to law, ritual authority, and living belief. 5 places, 5 corrections. The country did not change. What changed is what the evidence forced history to admit. India is often introduced through monuments, crowds, color, and a few familiar timelines. But none of that is enough to understand a civilization built in layers. Here, history is not a straight line. It is stone carved downward, bones released by ice, cities lost in granite, writing still undeciphered, and doors still closed by living belief. These 5 places do not rewrite history by proving fantasy. They rewrite it by making the usual timeline too small. It begins where the rock itself was treated as something that could be reshaped. Chapter 1. Kailasa, the temple carved out of a mountain in western India on the edge of the Deccan Plateau. A long cliff curves through dry, open country. From the road there is nothing obvious. A line of low basalt, brush, heat. Then the rock opens. 34 caves stretch along the escarpment at Ellora in the state of Maharashtra, cut directly into the volcanic stone over several centuries. Hindu shrines, Buddhist monasteries, Jain sanctuaries, all carved into the same cliff. Different faiths, different periods, one mountain, but Ellora is not remembered for its scale alone. It is remembered for what stands at its center. Cave 16, the Kailasa Temple. From above, it looks like a fully built complex. Courtyards, towers, halls, life-sized stone elephants. A central shrine rising more than 30 meters into the air. It looks constructed. It is not. The entire structure was carved from a single mass of basalt, cut from the top down, hollowed inward. Shaped from the outside before the interior was even reached. Estimates suggest that more than 200,000 tons of rock had to be removed to create it. No assembly, no foundation laid, little margin for error. Once the stone was gone, it was gone. And that is where Kailasa becomes more than a temple, because every cut had to be planned before it was made. Every column, every doorway, every carved figure existed first as empty space, waiting to be defined. The artists were not adding to the rock. They were finding the temple already inside it. Scholars generally place the main construction in the 8th century during the reign of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. That part history accepts. What is harder to absorb is the logistics. How a team of workers using the tools of the period could remove that much material with that much precision, working downward with so little margin for error. How they kept the proportions stable while cutting blind into solid stone. How the carved figures, elephants supporting the main hall, dancers along the walls, scenes from Hindu epics, kept their detail at every depth. Even today, with modern surveying, reproducing Kailasa at the same level of finish would be a serious engineering undertaking. In the 8th century, it was a generational one. And then there is what surrounds it. The cave next to Kailasa shifts to Buddhist iconography. A short distance away, the carvings turn Jain. Three of India's major religious traditions sharing the same cliff without erasing one another. That coexistence is the deeper structure of Ellora, not one faith carved in stone. A civilization confident enough to let several inhabit the same mountain. Kailasa does not rewrite history because it is impossible. It rewrites history because it stands as one of the most ambitious rock-cut monuments of its era, proof of what early medieval Indian planning, labor, faith, and geometry could do when all four were forced into the same mountain. It changes the assumption that this kind of monumental, top-down rock-cut architecture belongs only to a handful of famous sites in the wider ancient world. India did not arrive late to that scale. It carved its own version of it, straight down into a cliff in the Deccan. But India does not only rewrite history in stone, sometimes it does it with bones. Chapter 2. Roopkund, the lake that changed its own story. High in the Indian Himalayas, in the state of Uttarakhand, a small body of water sits at roughly 5,000 meters above sea level. Most of the year, it is frozen. For a few weeks in summer, the ice retreats. The surface opens, and the lake reveals what is at its edge. Bones, hundreds of them, skulls, femurs, fragments of clothing, scattered along the shore and partially submerged in the shallow water. This is Roopkund, sometimes called Skeleton Lake, and for a long time it had a single, simple explanation. When the remains were first reported in the mid-20th century, the dominant theory was that they belonged to one group, killed in a single event. Most likely a violent hailstorm that caught them in the open at high altitude. A tragedy, but a contained one. One disaster, one group, one moment in time. Then the science caught up. Over the following decades, researchers carried out radiocarbon dating and, more recently, large-scale genetic analysis on dozens of the remains. What they found did not fit the original story. The bones did not all belong to the same period. They did not all belong to the same population. According to the genetic studies published in recent years, some of the remains are consistent with ancestry from the Indian subcontinent. Others appear closer to Eastern Mediterranean populations. And the dating did not cluster around a single century. Some remains are estimated to be roughly 1,000 years old. Others appeared to be far more recent, separated from the older group by several hundred years. Which means Roopkund was never one event. It was several. A high-altitude site where different people, in different periods, somehow ended up at the same lake, and did not leave. The lake did not give one answer. It gave several, separated by centuries. And that changes the question entirely. It is no longer only what happened here. It is who kept coming and why. Roopkund sits on or near a high-altitude pilgrimage route that has been used for a very long time. A traditional Hindu pilgrimage, the Nanda Devi Raj Jat, still passes through this region every few years. The terrain is harsh. Storms at this altitude can be sudden and severe. The weather offers no margin. That gives one plausible piece of the picture. Local groups, possibly pilgrims, caught in conditions that did not forgive them. But it does not explain everything. The presence of remains that appear closer to Eastern Mediterranean populations, dated several centuries later, points to something researchers are still working through. It may point to long-distance movement of people through these mountains in ways the standard narrative did not fully account for. The reason remains unresolved. What is clear is that this remote, frozen lake was not as isolated as it looks. It sat on the edge of a network of human presence that connected high Himalayan India to a wider world. And for centuries, the people who did not survive that crossing stayed where they fell, until the ice began to release them. Roopkund rewrites history not because it is supernatural. It rewrites it because what looked like a single tragedy turned into a layered record of pilgrimage, of risk, of long-distance human presence in a place that seems too remote to hold so many stories. Bones rewrite one kind of history. Ruins rewrite another. Chapter 3. Hampi. The capital the world forgot. In southern India, in the state of Karnataka, the landscape changes without warning. Open plains give way to granite, not scattered, stacked. Enormous boulders, some the size of small buildings, balanced against each other across the horizon as if placed by hand. This is the landscape of Hampi, and 500 years ago, it was the heart of one of the wealthiest empires of its time. The Vijayanagara Empire ruled large parts of southern India from the 14th to the 16th century. At its peak, its capital, built around modern-day Hampi, stood as one of the great urban centers of its era. Foreign travelers from Portugal, Persia, and Italy left detailed accounts. They described markets stretching for miles, temples lit at night, royal processions, war elephants in armor, traders from across Asia and the Middle East moving through the streets. It was not a quiet kingdom. It was a center of long-distance trade in gold, diamonds, horses, and textiles. A place foreign ambassadors traveled across continents to reach. And then, in 1565, it ended. A coalition of rival sultanates defeated the empire at the Battle of Talakota. Within days, the capital was sacked. Over weeks and months, it was burned, broken, and stripped. A city of hundreds of thousands of people was effectively emptied. What remains today is not a ruin in the soft, romantic sense. It is a ruin in the precise sense. Temple complexes still standing in the open. A carved stone chariot, royal enclosures, bathing tanks, market streets where the stone platforms of vanished shops still line the road. The Virupaksha Temple is still active, the only one of the major sites where worship never fully stopped, even after the empire collapsed around it. A few kilometers away, the Vitala Temple complex holds a hall of slender pillars traditionally associated with musical tones, an acoustic reputation that has long been part of the site's legend. Many of those columns have been damaged over the centuries, but what they show is consistent. This was a civilization that brought music, mathematics, architecture, and devotion together as a single discipline. What makes Hampi rewrite history is not just the architecture. It is the scale of the loss. Because Vijayanagara at its height was comparable in size and wealth to the most important capitals of its era anywhere on Earth. And yet, in most global narratives, it sits in a footnote, if it appears at all. Standing inside the empty market street with the granite rising in the distance and the temple towers still cutting the skyline, the absence becomes part of the experience. You are not walking through a small site. You are walking through a vanished metropolis, and the boulders themselves carry their own deep time. They are far older than the empire. The Vijayanagara rulers built around them, incorporated them into walls, carved shrines into them, used them as platforms. The capital did not impose itself on the landscape. It worked with it. That is part of why Hampi feels different from other ancient sites. It is not just historical, it is geological. A civilization layered onto a terrain hundreds of millions of years older than itself. Today the boulders remain. The temples remain. The empire does not. Hampi rewrites history because it shows how a capital of global importance can almost slip out of common memory. If a city of this scale, this wealth, this complexity could fall out of the everyday picture of world history, what else has quietly been left out of the frame? But Hampi was a city that rose, peaked, and disappeared. The next place began earlier than most people think cities should have existed at all. Chapter 4. Dholavira. The city that began too early in the far west of India, in the state of Gujarat. The land opens into something that does not quite look like a country. White flats stretch to the horizon, salt crust, heat, shimmer, wind moving without obstruction across miles of empty ground. This is the Rann of Kutch, and somewhere inside this landscape, on a small island within the salt, sit the remains of a city that quietly reshapes the meaning of the word ancient. Dholavira, a city of the Indus Valley civilization, occupied roughly between 3000 and 1500 BCE. That timeline is the point, because this city was already a planned urban center while much of what is usually called ancient history had not yet begun. It overlaps with the early dynasties of ancient Egypt. It predates classical Greece by a wide margin. It predates Rome by even more. And it was not a village, it was a fully organized city. What survives at Dholavira is the layout of an urban system built with deliberate engineering. A fortified citadel, a middle town, a lower town, streets aligned in a grid, stone walls, stone gates, drainage running beneath the streets, reservoirs cut directly into the rock to capture and store water in one of the driest regions of the subcontinent. That last detail matters more than it sounds, because the Rann of Kutch is not a forgiving environment. Rainfall is limited. Surface water is scarce. For a city of this size to function here for centuries, water management could not be improvised. It had to be designed. Carved channels, stepped reservoirs, catchments fed by seasonal streams. A system that allowed thousands of people to live in one of the most challenging climates of the ancient world. That alone places Dholavira among the major urban centers of the Indus world. But there is one more detail that pulls the entire site forward. At one of the gates of the citadel, archaeologists found a row of large symbols set into the wall in a way that suggests they were meant to be seen by people approaching. Often described as one of the earliest known examples of public signage of its kind, the symbols belong to the Indus Valley script, and that script, to this day, has not been deciphered. Thousands of Indus inscriptions have been recovered across the wider civilization, on seals, on pottery, on small objects, and so far no one has been able to read them with certainty. The exact meaning remains debated, which means at Dholavira, you are standing in front of a city that was already using script-like signs, already organizing space, already managing water, and already building at urban scale. And we still cannot fully hear what it had to say. The city left signs. We just cannot read them. That changes how India fits into early world history, because the standard story often centers Mesopotamia and Egypt as the founding urban civilizations of the ancient world. The Indus Valley sits beside them, comparable in scale, comparable in sophistication. In some respects, sanitation, planning, water systems, arguably ahead. And it was not a small footprint. The Indus Valley civilization extended across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, with hundreds of identified sites. Dholavira is one of its eastern anchors. Walking through it today, the city is mostly outlines, foundations, low walls, empty reservoirs, but the geometry holds. You can still read the gates, the plazas, the clean separation between zones. The way the city sat on its rocky platform, looking out across what used to be a navigable channel, long before the salt flats took over. And then it ended. The civilization declined. Cities were abandoned, trade routes shifted, the climate changed. Whatever exactly happened, and there is still debate. The result was that an entire urban tradition stepped out of the historical record for a very long time. Dholavira was excavated in earnest only in the late 20th century, which means much of what it tells us is recent knowledge, not inherited knowledge. Dholavira rewrites history because it proves that one of the world's earliest urban civilizations was not marginal, not small, and not waiting for later empires to give it meaning. It was already there, building, planning, marking space, long before the timeline most people know was ever written. But the final place does not rewrite history because it was excavated. It rewrites history because it has not been. Chapter 5. Padmanabhaswamy. The door India still will not open in the city of Thiruvananthapuram, in the southern state of Kerala, stands a temple dedicated to Vishnu, the Padmanabhaswamy Temple. From the outside, it follows the visual grammar of South Indian temple architecture. A tall, tiered gateway tower, stone corridors, lamps, pilgrims moving through the daily rhythm of worship. It is one of the oldest and most important Vaishnavite temples in India. That alone would make it significant. But Padmanabhaswamy is not famous around the world for its architecture. It is famous for what was found beneath it, and for what may still be there. Underneath the temple lie a series of underground vaults, sealed, heavily restricted, tied to centuries of royal patronage by the former rulers of Travancore, and to the ritual life of the temple itself. For a very long time, these vaults sat quietly under the floor of one of India's most active places of worship. Then, in 2011, that changed. Following a legal process, several of the temple's vaults were opened and inventoried under judicial supervision. What was found inside is not in dispute. Gold ornaments, ceremonial objects, statues, precious stones, coins and ritual items donated and accumulated over centuries. The combined value of the items recovered has been widely described as one of the largest accumulations of temple wealth ever publicly inventoried. Exact figures vary across sources, and many of the items carry religious and historical significance that goes far beyond their material value. But of all the vaults, one was treated differently: Vault B. According to publicly available accounts, the main chamber of Vault B was not opened as part of the 2011 inventory process. It remained sealed. The reasons are not simple. They involve temple tradition, religious authority, the views of priests and the royal trustees of the temple, and ongoing legal proceedings before Indian courts about who exactly has the right to make that decision. Within temple tradition, Vault B is treated as a chamber of particular sacred significance. According to tradition, opening it without strict ritual conditions is not seen as a neutral act. The door is described in some accounts as bearing imagery of serpents, treated as protectors of the chamber within that ritual framework. What lies behind that ritual framing is not public record. What is clear from court documents and reporting is more grounded. The main chamber has not been part of the public inventory. There are legal and religious questions about whether it should be. There are unresolved disputes about who holds the authority to decide, and the chamber remains closed to ordinary public knowledge. In a world where almost every major historical site, archive, and treasure room has been cataloged, photographed, and published, this door has not. That, in itself, is rare. The mystery is not only what may be behind the door, The mystery is who has the right to decide whether it should be opened. Because in most countries, in most centuries, the answer would already exist. A government decree, an archaeological expedition, a scientific survey, a simple decision to know. In this case, the question is not technical. It is who holds the moral, religious, and legal authority to make that call. And so far, no consensus has been reached. A vault, a temple, a royal lineage, a court, a living tradition, all meeting at the same closed door. Padmanabhaswamy rewrites history because it reminds us that not every historical question is waiting for excavation. Some are protected by living belief. Some are held back not by missing evidence, but by the deliberate decision of a culture not to open them yet. It changes what history even means. In some places, history is what we have dug up. In others, history is what we are still choosing not to. 5 places, 5 corrections. A temple carved downward into a mountain. A frozen lake holding centuries of unrelated travelers. A vanished capital scattered across a horizon of granite. A desert city older than most of what is called ancient. A vault still sealed and a temple still active in a country still negotiating with its own past. None of them stand alone. Together, they outline a country that does not fit neatly into the story most of the world is told about it. Kailasa shows what stone can become when planning, labor, faith, and geometry are pushed into a single mountain. Roopkund shows what bones can reveal when ice and DNA decide to speak together. Hampi shows how a capital of global importance can almost slip out of common memory. Dholavira shows how early India's urban world really was, already organized, while most of what we call ancient history had not yet started. Padmanabhaswamy shows that some of history's most powerful questions are not waiting for archaeologists. They are waiting for permission. These places do not rewrite history by proving fantasy. They rewrite it by expanding the frame. By proving that India's past was always bigger, older, stranger, and more carefully guarded than the simple version of the timeline allows. India does not rewrite history by breaking the timeline. It rewrites it by proving the timeline was always too small. This is India, the version most of the world never sees.
Yeah.